Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual classroom. I'm super excited that you tuned into our page because we have a lot to learn today. Now, the topic we'll be considering today is a topic that affects us as humans. It's not an abstract topic, it's something we can relate with. I know we have all heard about what photosynthesis is all about, or maybe you have just heard the word, or maybe you've not even heard about it before. Okay, this is actually an avenue for you to gain more knowledge about it in a very simple way. No much words, no big words, just words you can relate with and things you can be able to see around you. So let's move on. Now we're talking about photosynthesis, and we're going to explain its processes and how it actually affects plants. Okay. Now moving on, we have three outlined stages or three outlined aspects that we're going to talk about today. The first is what photosynthesis is and why it's important. The second is the stages of photosynthesis. And the third is the role of chloroplast and chlorophyll. All right. So first of all, what is photosynthesis? The most simplest definition of photosynthesis is this, that photosynthesis is the process by which plants make their own food using sunlight. Now remember that animals, or rather organisms that produce their own food, are always called autotrophs. So the plants around you are called autotrophs because they are organisms, or rather they are living things that produce their own food. They are not like we humans that have to depend on other animals and plants to feed. All right. So now photosynthesis simply is a process, okay, by which plants make their own food using sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and chlorophyll. All right. So that's why I added over here, I added inputs. Input simply means the factors that are required for photosynthesis to take place. So this is the most simplest definition you can get of photosynthesis. So the plants around you, like your orange tree, even the yam that is being grown in farms, how do they produce, how do these plants produce such food? Okay, we have seen even a corn field before. How does these green plants produce that corn that we eat? That's what photosynthesis is all about. So photosynthesis is telling us that each of these plants, be it the corn, yam, apple tree, guava tree, orange tree, each of these trees and each of these plants make use of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They make use of water, they make use of the sunlight, and also chlorophyll to what produce these foods. Okay, now I want to talk about outputs. Outputs are talking about the products that are given out after photosynthesis is carried out, and these outputs are what? Oxygen and glucose. Remember, whenever you talk about glucose in photosynthesis, it simply means food. It simply means what? Food, the particular kind of food that a plant produces. Take for example, if you have a yam plant. Okay, the glucose of a yam plant is the yam that is being produced. Same thing with an orange tree. The glucose of that orange tree is what? The orange that is being produced. Okay, so it occurs in the chloroplast of cells. Yes, photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast of plant cells. Now, chloroplasts are only found in plant cells. They are not found in animal cells because this is where photosynthesis occurs. So human beings or animals don't carry out photosynthesis. Only plants carry out photosynthesis. Only plants that are able to produce their own food, especially green plants, they are the only ones that would carry out their own that carry out photosynthesis. Okay, so remember that chloroplasts are found in plant cells, and chloroplasts, they are the major part of the plant cell that carries out photosynthesis. Now let's take a look at how a chloroplast looks like. Now this is a typical plant cell. This is a typical plant cell. Now zooming in, you find out that, okay, this structure here is what are chloroplasts. Okay, these are chloroplasts, and also this here too is a chloroplast. So this chloroplast you're seeing over here is what is responsible. This is what is responsible for what? Photosynthesis in a plant. As you can notice down here, this particular chloroplast is green in nature. Okay, this is showing that this is where what the chlorophyll is. Okay, now chlorophyll is what? A green pigment, meaning it's a green color that is found only in the chloroplast, only in this chloroplast. So if this chloroplast carries the chlorophyll, all right, and the chlorophyll is what? A green color. It is what makes plants green. So if you're being asked in an exam, what pigment gives plants their green color? The answer is what? The chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll does not just give plants green color alone, but the chlorophyll is also responsible for absorbing the sunlight. that is used for photosynthesis in plants. So you can imagine that chlorophyll is important. That's why over here we said what, that the four major important requirements in photosynthesis are carbon dioxide, water, sunlight, and chlorophyll. Okay, this is what your chlorophyll. And this chlorophyll, remember, this chlorophyll is found only in what, the chloroplast of what, a plant cell. And this is what, the chloroplast. This is a chloroplast. This is a chloroplast. And this is a chloroplast. Okay, so moving on. This is a very simple diagram, a very simple and detailed diagram that shows everything the photosynthesis is. Now, the arrows you find in this diagram are more like the descriptive pointers. They are telling us what's happening into this particular plant. Okay. Now, if you notice, there's an arrow coming from the sun, and the arrow is facing the plant. So it means that this plant is absorbing sunlight. Remember, we said sunlight is one of the major requirements in photosynthesis. So plants receive sunlight, that's one. Plants receive carbon dioxide, that is two. That's the second the carbon dioxide is the second major requirement in photosynthesis. Now, if you notice also water goes into the plant. So this plant also takes in water, and water is the third requirements in photosynthesis. And then if you notice, this plant is green. This plant is majorly green. Now this plant is green because of the presence of chlorophyll. The presence of chlorophyll that is found inside the chloroplast of plant cells. Now if you notice, oxygen over here is not going into the plant. Rather, oxygen is going out of the plant. It's going out of the plant. So it means oxygen is the product, or you can say oxygen is the result photosynthesis. It is what the plant gives out after it carries out photosynthesis, or rather during photosynthesis. Now if you notice here too, food, which in this case is the apple fruit. Food is what we call glucose in photosynthesis. So whenever you find this word glucose, or you find chemical energy, these two words are simply meaning food, the food that is being produced by plants or during photosynthesis. So this whole diagram tells us what photosynthesis is all about. If you go up here, you see light energy. This light energy simply means sunlight, or your solar energy. Anything that talks about solar is sunlight. Anything that talks about light energy in photosynthesis is also sunlight. So photosynthesis, as described here, is the ability of a plant to take in sunlight. It is the ability of a plant to take in sunlight, carbon dioxide, oxygen, and water. It is the ability of a plant to take in sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and chlorophyll to produce oxygen and glucose, which is the food. Now, photosynthesis has a chemical equation, a represented chemical equation that is valid everywhere. All right. Now remember, we said the four major factors are sunlight, chlorophyll, water, and carbon dioxide. Okay, so these are the four major requirements in photosynthesis. The molecular formula for carbon dioxide is CO2. The molecular formula for water is H2O. Now we have sunlight over here and chlorophyll down here. Now 6 molecules of carbon dioxide combines with 6 molecules of water to produce, in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll, to produce glucose and oxygen. So glucose is C6H12O6, while the molecular formula for oxygen is 6 molecules of O2. That's O2 being oxygen. All right. So right here, this carbon dioxide and water is called reactants. They are the reactants in photosynthesis. These are called the reactants. And while glucose and oxygen is called the products. So when you're being asked in an exam, what the reactants in photosynthesis are, your answer should be carbon dioxide and water. Then when you're being asked about the products, your answer should be glucose and oxygen. Okay, so moving forward, why is photosynthesis important? Number one, it produces oxygen, which is essential for life. Now, without oxygen, human beings cannot exist. Okay, if you're being kept away, or if you're being restrained from breathing in oxygen for a period of time, you find out that the organs inside your body starts dying, because you need oxygen to carry out certain processes inside your body. Even respiration is as a result of what? The intake of oxygen. All right. So oxygen is important not just to human beings but also to animals. And this oxygen are being what made available because of what? Photosynthesis in plants. So what happens here is this. Okay, if you notice in this diagram, human beings take in oxygen, isn't it? If you notice, just look at the arrow head and just observe where it is pointing to. All right. Now, this arrowhead is pointing to man, that man takes in oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide. Now, plants then take in this carbon dioxide and carries out photosynthesis, and finally what? Release what? Oxygen. So it's actually a circle. It's like a circle. Human beings take in oxygen and breathes out carbon dioxide, and plants take in that carbon dioxide and gives out oxygen. Human beings then would breathe the oxygen and gives out carbon dioxide, just like that. It's a cycle. So imagine that there are no plants here on Earth. You find out that there will be limited, or there will be no oxygen to go around humanity. They even go around, and there will be no much oxygen that will be what? Enough for both animals and humans. Okay, now if I know you've heard about other planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars, and all, you find out that most of these planets are not an ideal, if they're not fit for human dwelling because they lack oxygen. Those planets lack oxygen. Now, if you've seen any kind of um, um, picture of these planets, you find out that these planets don't even have what? Plant life. These planets do not support plant life, and because they don't support plant life, oxygen level there is very limited, very low, very little. All right. So it is plants. It is plants that what supplies major uh, um, major volume of oxygen in the atmosphere. So number two importance of photosynthesis is it converts solar energy into chemical energy. Solar energy simply means sunlight, and chemical energy simply means the food that plants produce, which is still glucose. So we either call it food or glucose or chemical energy. All right, that is when you're talking about photosynthesis alone. The number three, it forms the primary source of food chain. Now, this is what a food chain looks like. Okay, we have the source here to be a grass, and the grass is a plant, isn't it? And then the grasshopper eats the grass, and the toad eats the grasshopper. All right. Now you find out that if there is no grass, the grasshopper will not feed, and once the grasshopper does not feed, the grasshopper what? Dies. Like it will stay, it will what? Cease from existing. And once there is no grasshopper, the toads cannot feed on the grasshoppers, and they themselves might also what? Go extinct. Okay, so from this diagram, you find out that the very first what food consumption here is what at the grass level. So photosynthesis is what makes grasses to also be the way they are. All right, they are green. They have fiber and glucose in them that provide certain food what to animals that consumes grasses. So this is what we talk about. What it's forming the base of food consumption, right? Forming the base of the source of food. Okay, so moving on, we have the stages of photosynthesis. So the two major stages of photosynthesis are the light reactions and the dark reactions. So as the name implies, the light reactions is what has to do with the part of photosynthesis that requires sunlight, while the dark reactions is the part of photosynthesis that does not require sunlight. Now remember, we are not saying that there are two types of photosynthesis. No, photosynthesis has no types. Rather, it has what? Two stages. All right, take for example, when you're doing laundry, okay, when you're doing laundry, don't say you have different types of laundry. No, you say there are what? Stages to laundry. Like the first stage of laundry is what? To what? Wash your clothes using detergents and soap. Now the second stage is to what? To rinse it in the clean water. The third stage is to what? Dry. The fourth is to iron. Same way in photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is one what's process, but it is being broken down into two different stages. The first stage is the light reaction stage, and it happens in the chloroplast. And even both the light reaction stage and the dark reactions, they both occur in the chloroplast. All right, but this light reaction stage, this light reaction stage occurs in the thylakoid of the chloroplast, while the dark reaction stage occurs what at the stroma of the chloroplast. Now let's move on to see how this really looks like. Okay. Okay, let's come here. So now this is what a typical diagram of what how a chloroplast looks like. All right, this is what how a chloroplast looks like when you view it up close using a microscope. All right, now you find out that this green pile of disc that is being stuck here is called the thylakoid. This is kind of thylakoid here. is called what the thylakoid, and one of it, each of it is called a granule. So one of these thylakoid is called a granule, but when they are brought together like this, it's called what? A thylakoid. Right? This is where the light reaction stage occurs. Now, this second stage, the dark stage, occurs at the stroma. Now, I see all this space here, all this like all this a gray colored painting is called what the stroma. It's actually liquid when you view it using a microscope. This is called the stroma. This is where the dark reaction occurs. All right. So let's move over to this point. Where does photosynthesis happen? So said it occurs in the chloroplast. As we earlier said, photosynthesis always occurs in the chloroplast. Chloroplast is where photosynthesis occurs. So the chloroplast contains what? The chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll is what? A green pigment. Now this green pigment, being the chlorophyll, does not just give color to plants alone, but it also what? Absorbs sunlight. All right, this sunlight that comes to a plant, it is that green pigment, which is the chlorophyll, that traps that sunlight, that absorbs that sunlight. So as I said here, we have two major parts of the chloroplast. We have the thylakoid. All right, the major parts of the chloroplast are what? The thylakoid and the stroma. Now in this thylakoid, that's the green, that green thing that is being stacked here. This one here is the thylakoid. All right, the thylakoid is what? The thylakoid is where the light-dependent reaction occurs, while the stroma, which is the second part of the chloroplast, is where what? The light-independent reaction takes place, or the dark reaction takes place. Now, this second stage is either called the Calvin cycle, or it's called the light-independent reactions, or it's also called what? The dark reactions. So whenever you see Calvin cycle in your textbook or in your exam, just know you're talking about what? The dark reaction of photosynthesis stage. If you see light independent reactions, it also means what? The dark reaction of what? Photosynthetic stage. You understand? So why it is called light independent, it means it does not need sunlight to carry out its own processes. And let's move forward. Breaking this down, all right, what happens here is this green thylakoid here. Okay, no, remember that it's the chlorophyll that made it look green. All right, this thylakoid here, now the chlorophyll inside this thylakoid traps this sunlight, it absorbs this sunlight, and what synthesizes the sunlight to produce ATP energy and NADPH energy. All right, and it also uses this same sunlight energy to break down water, H2O, into what? Oxygen. This is where we get our oxygen, into what? The oxygen, and also what? Your hydrogen ions. All right. Now this ATP NADPH energy that is being produced is then what? Moved down to this other stroma. All right, where the dark reaction occurs. Now instead of this dark reaction to make use of the sunlight to carry out its photosynthetic process, it would rather use, instead of this dark reaction to use sunlight, it would rather use what? ATP. That's the energy that was produced during the light independent stage. It will make use of that energy, which is the ATP energy and the NADPH energy, to make use of these two energies to what? To break down carbon dioxide in order to produce what? Food. This Ga3P is what? The food. Okay. And remember that we said food or glucose is what? That particular type of fruit or crop that a plant produces. All right. So once it produces this food, it also what? Gives back to the light dependent stage the what? ADP plus the PI and the what? NADP. Okay, so it's a circle. That's why it's called what? It's a circle. All right, it's a circle. So moving on, we have what influences photosynthesis. What we mean here is what are the factors or the things that is required or that would determine the result of photosynthesis. Number one, we have light intensity. When we talk about light intensity, we mean sunlight. Okay, the amount of sunlight that is being used or that is being absorbed determines or influences photosynthesis in plants. So if there is very low sunlight, if there's very low sunlight progression, all right, it would bring about a decline in photosynthetic processes. All right. So if you notice that if you have ever observed if you've ever observed a plant that was being kept under sunlight and another that was being kept inside a room, possibly with no sunlight reaching it, you find out that what this other plant that's been placed on under sunlight tends to be more healthy and even grows straight without any abnormality. But the plant that is being kept inside a room or a darker environment would appear to be unhealthy, and it would always keep on trying to bend itself towards where it can get light. So light intensity, which is the sunlight, is very necessary, all right, when it comes to photosynthesis. So number two, we talked about carbon dioxide levels. All right. If you notice in our equation, we used six huge molecules of carbon dioxide and what six molecules of water. You find out that just these two major molecules being in such a high proportion, it shows that it is a need. All right, and lower presence or lower intake of carbon dioxide by a plant will also affect its photosynthetic processes. Same thing with temperature and what water. So if you're being asked in an exam hall, the four major factors that influences photosynthesis, you would say sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and temperature. So these are what external factors that influences photosynthesis. Chlorophyll, on the other hand, is inbuilt. All right, it is inbuilt, so it is not really seen as a major influence in photosynthesis, but it is a major requirement in photosynthesis. Okay, so moving forward, we have few fun facts about photosynthesis that I had to just write down. Number one is what without photosynthesis, there would be no oxygen for us to breathe. All right, like what I said earlier, imagine there are no plants here on Earth. Our plants, this that if there's no plants here on Earth, that means our Earth will be like the Venus and Mars, where that cannot even support plant life. How much more animal life? All right. So photosynthesis is very very important as it makes oxygen to be available, readily available, and abundantly available. So number two here says over half of the world's photosynthesis happens in the sea. I learned this while I was studying. All right, I was studying, like I came across it, and I find it a very wonderful knowledge that every biologist should know. Okay, that over half of the world's photosynthesis happens inside the ocean is a very very wonderful finding. All right, so you can also add up more fun facts you know about photosynthesis, and then put it in the comment box for others to learn. I myself, I'll look forward to see your comments to learn from whatever observations and fun facts you can get from photosynthesis. Now I just coined out three different questions, just as just to spice up our class. Okay, it's not to scare us; it's just to make sure we know ourselves that we are following up. So number one, I asked, what gas do plants release during photosynthesis? Number two, what is the main product of photosynthesis process? Number three, what part of the plant cell carries out photosynthesis? These are very simple questions. These are very, very simple questions. But I'm going to provide the answers now. All right. In case you're struggling with the answers, which I pray you're not, please, if you know you're struggling with getting these answers, you can still review the lesson, review what I have taught you on this topic, and listen to it more attentively without any form of distraction. Be able to easily get the answers to these questions. All right. So the answer for number one question is oxygen. So remember that oxygen is a gas. All right. So he said, what gas do plants release during photosynthesis? Now, release talks about what the end product of what photosynthesis. So the major gas, the only gas that photosynthesis releases after its process is what? Oxygen. The answer is oxygen. Number two, what is the main product of the photosynthesis process? Now, the main product of photosynthesis is glucose, which is what? C6H12O6. Glucose is the major product that is gotten from photosynthesis, while oxygen is what? The major gas. You see the difference? Oxygen is the gas, the major gas that is being produced, while glucose is what? The major product of photosynthesis. And remember, glucose is food. Glucose is the food that plants produce. So the major reason why plants carry out photosynthesis is to produce food, and food is glucose. All right. So the answer for number two is glucose. If you're being asked such a question in an exam hall, please don't write food. Please just write down glucose. Any examiner would understand and will give you your full mark. So number three, What part of the plant cell carries out photosynthesis? Remember, the answer is chloroplast. The chloroplast is the only organelle in the plant cell that carries out photosynthesis, and that's why it is green in almost every illustrative diagram you'd see, even online, even via even when being placed under a microscope. You find out that the chloroplasts are always green, and you do know why the chloroplast is green, right? Yes, it's because of the presence of chlorophyll inside of the chloroplast. Okay. So in conclusion here, in summary, okay, we noted that photosynthesis is how plants make food and release oxygen. And we also noted here that it happens in two stages, which is the light and the dark reactions. So if you can still also write the light dependent reaction and or the light independent reaction. So anyone that works for you, you pen it down, you would surely get what your appropriate mark. If you even find yourself in public and you make mention of light dependent stage and even your Calvin cycle, all right, everybody, every biologist and every educated person would be able to relate and would know that you are correct. So the third point we noted down here is what chloroplasts and chlorophyll are vital for this process. So without chlorophyll, there is no photosynthesis, because remember, it is chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, that what traps, or rather it is chlorophyll that absorbs the sunlight, all right, from the atmosphere. Okay, so chlorophyll is very important in photosynthesis, and the chlorophyll is found inside the chloroplast. Therefore, the chloroplast is also very vital in photosynthesis. Now remember that the chloroplast is found in the plant cell. All right, it is found in the plant cell of every green plant, okay, of every green plant. All right, so that is it. So as a closing thoughts, plants are nature's solar panels. So why I actually added this and why I feel that yes, plants are nature's solar panels is because so plants absorb the solar energy from the sun, all right, in order to bring out food and oxygen. So it's like it's reflecting nature, all right, it's reflecting something good while taking in solar energy. So always working hard to keep, so let me repeat, plants are nature's solar panels, always working hard to keep life going. So you find out that plant does not just give us food, because in fact the plant giving us food keeps life going, because without food animals will die. All right, now plant also keeps life going by supplying oxygen for breathing. So you find that plants they don't just give us food, they also help to sustain our lives. All right, so please take that bold step today and make sure you're found in an environment where there are much plants. Science has even made it a mandatory exercise, or rather a mandatory thing, that every household should have surrounding plants, should have plants or flowers around their homes to help in the production of oxygen. Just as we live in big cities where there are so many pollution coming out from cars, coming out from factories, and no, these gases that comes out from these cars and factories are not good for human health. All right, so the best way for you to maintain good health is to make sure you surround yourself with more of plants. All right, so also in surrounding yourself with plants, it would give you a sense of closure and a sense of understanding to the essence of photosynthesis to humans. All right, so I find this topic very, very, very interesting. All right, there are more to know about photosynthesis. It doesn't just end here. All right, there are more to know, and as you go on and exploring, you find out more wonderful facts about photosynthesis. So this is it, guys. This is the end of our class for today. I hope you found it very interesting. I hope you found it very educative. Please drop your comments. All right, so I would be able to track your each person's progress and your learning pattern. All right, so see you guys in my next video. Do have a lovely day.